think we're good to go.
I nominate Paul to be the chair.
Second.
Surprised you didn't get that first, Paul. All in favor?
All right. Roll call. Mark.
Go.
Ed Rankin.
Here.
And Paul DeSmith is here. Next item on the agenda is community garden request.
We have a group here who, there's a number of people on the call. There's, I believe, one who will be doing the presenting. You all have a packet of information that was provided prior to the meeting that was also on our website. The only thing that's changed is that there were some additional names added after to the list of supporters after the posting, but they also received invitations into this meeting. So Teresa is not Michael, but she's the one who would, I believe, be presenting on behalf of the group. If you want to go ahead and
yeah. So, hello everyone. I'm Terry Van Preet, not Michael Haydock. That's my husband. We share a computer. So, I'm Terry Van Preet, and I am a recent graduate of the Master Gardener program through the University of Maine Cooperative Extension. And while I was working on my certificate, I had the opportunity to work at a community garden in Hancock. And in that role, I worked on a garden plot that harvested for Harvest for Hunger, which is an initiative through the Master Gardeners to provide fresh produce to the food pantries. So that's how I first learned about food pantries and food security through the garden, the community garden thing. So community gardens can take a lot of different forms, and every community garden that I've worked in, and there have been 3, have had a little bit of a different structure. The ones here in Maine do seem to focus on food security and feeding the hungry. But I have seen others that it was revolved mostly around providing garden space for people who lived in apartments, for example. So they can take different forms, but it's really about empowering people to grow their own food and allowing them space to grow food and flowers for their own enjoyment. I really like the idea, and I think it would be great to have one in Bucksport. I think that there'd be a lot of people who'd be really interested in doing it, and it'd be a great opportunity to provide communication and education and a sense of community for our town. So I had this idea, and then I met a bunch of other people who had similar ideas, and Genevieve being one of them. And we all get together and we hatched out a plan as to what we thought would be a good fit for Bucksport. So so that's where this whole idea came up with. So that's what we planned, and what we really need is space to do it. So and someone to do it under. So if this could be a township initiative, then if the town could provide land and insurance and things like that, that would be a nonprofit, then the volunteers could all get it all to work. So that's really what we're asking for. First of all, we would like the council support to voice an interest in what we are doing and to advertise it and let people know that, this is something that could happen. And secondly, we are looking for land. We need about a third of an acre. A little under a third of an acre would be okay too. The plan that we have right now, the garden plan that I had prepared in the packet, is a little over a quarter of an acre. So if we had a third of an acre, then we'd have a place for people to park and a place for a shed and things like that. So once again, we'd like the garden to be under the purview of the town of Bucksport and have the benefit of the township insurance. And we would like some money so we could put up a fence to keep the deer out. So I did a cost analysis for that, and the fencing cost would be about $2,700 for the purchase of materials, and then we can get volunteers to install it. The community gardens that I've worked in the past, the residents pay a nominal fee, usually about $20 or $30. Actually, it was $20 30 years ago. So, but I still think that's enough to charge people. So if we charge $20 for a 10 by 10 plot, and in the plan there's also some plots that are larger, we could charge a little bit more for that, and that rent would pay for things that would support the garden, like mulch and compost and things like that. So our vision is that gardeners can grow and harvest crops of their choice, that there would be a central area for children to play. If you look at the plan for the garden itself, that little picture that I drew up, you can see that there's a spot in the middle, I don't know if you can see that, for kids to play while their caregivers tend the garden around it. And then there are 4 points of access here, and a section is set aside for Harvest for Hunger to do the food for the food pantries, and then a section set aside for a seed garden. So one of our partners is the Buck Memorial Library, who has a seed library, and actually it's Lisa and I, Lisa Ladd and I, we had a donation of thousands, like tens of thousands of seeds that were donated from High Mowing Seed Company. And so we're going to be we're going to have our patrons check out the seed, and we're going to teach them how to save seed for the following year. And in this garden, I would like to set up a teaching garden so I can teach people how to propagate, how to harvest, how to save seed for the following year, how to do compost, and things like that. So I envision it being a place where people can come and learn how to be self-sufficient in some of their food choices. So and how to grow healthy food and how to grow organic food. And then we'll be asking for donations for tools and manure and materials to build a shed and things like that. I know there are actually farms that are dying to get rid of their manure, so we could give them a place to put that. Once we get land, we'll start looking for additional partnerships to get services and materials that we need to keep the garden going. So that is basically that. I also have a document here, the mission statement for the garden, that Bucksport Community Garden is dedicated to providing space for anyone to grow vegetables, fruit, and flowers for their own consumption, encouraging a sense of community, educating people to learn new and long-established techniques for gardening, growing and harvesting fresh fruits and vegetables, sharing the love of growing and eating healthy food, and providing community service opportunities for students, for example. I also have some general guidelines written up, and I have to admit, this was a total plagiarization. I took this from Hancock Garden and I just put our name on it. So this is the one that they have been using for years. And it is really just generally what the people who are using the garden should expect. And then a release of liability and then a list of people who are interested in making it happen. And the list is up to about 12 or 15 names by now. So that's that. Questions?
Questions from the committee?
Yeah, have you identified any place besides 27 Main that might be possibilities for you all?
No, not really. I was really interested in hearing what you had to say regarding that. Well, in our meetings, we've bounced around with, like, what about this place and what about that place? But I don't know what properties the town actually owns. We would like something that has fertile land that we can grow well on, that doesn't have any chemicals or anything on that, or concrete. We'd like something that is accessible to people in town if they don't have reliable form of transportation. Something they can walk to would be great. Something that is highly visible in the center of town so that people can see that we have a community garden, and then all the community building that would happen around that, and all the conversation and people stopping by and saying, oh, look, I see you growing cucumbers. I'm having a problem with my cucumbers. Can you solve it for me? So I just think something central would be great, but we don't have any place like we want this place in particular. The 27 Main, is that the piece of property that was in the newspaper today, the Main Street, the apartments and shops?
Yeah, it is. That parcel across from Napa. Yeah.
So I was looking at that article today, and I was thinking, well, if they could just give us like a quarter of an acre in front right there, that would be really good, because then all of those people who live in the apartments would have garden space right in front of their apartments. And if there's like a coffee shop there or something, then we could put seating around the garden and people can sit and have their coffee and watch us garden and look at the flowers, and people could walk by, and it would just look so attractive, having this garden space right in the center of town. And there's plenty of parking right in front of it, so there'd be a place for people to park if they were so inclined. And then just develop the rest of it. But,
well, Teresa, one thought I had was the old junior high, Gardner Commons, over by the baseball field. There is about a third of an acre there between the building and Summer Street that would have access to the parking lot at the baseball field, a playground right there for kids, and potentially, if the management company would allow, the potential to get water there as well.
that would be amazing. And water is one of the sticking points with community gardens. And there have been different ways to solve water problems in each of the gardens that I've worked with in the past. One of the gardens I worked with long ago, it was the city of Allentown, actually brought in a truck of water, and we would just take our containers there and fill up from the truck and then water our gardens. Another garden that I worked at, you had to bring your own. And there were times where I didn't have a car, and I would load down my bicycle with gallons of water. It was really fun to watch me ride my bike to my garden. And then the garden in Hancock, they just installed a new pump where they can pump water from a well up into a holding tank, and then they have water pressure. And that was a brand new installation for them, and that was a long time coming. So if we could have easy access to water, that would be a boon.
The town doesn't own the piece, but it's not. Sue, go ahead. I'll let you speak.
Paul, can I?
Yes. Oh, please do.
I reached out to Gardner Commons today, and the management company that oversees the property and asked about the possibility of that site. I also went to visit it today, but the fact that there's a parking lot directly across the street that serves the baseball field, that there is a playground adjacent right next to that, and that there's a sidewalk all the way to this location are all, and I also, it's possible to install a seasonal faucet at that location, which would allow for water on the site. However, the management company is going to contact, HUD is the financer of that property, and they are going to contact them to see if there would be any concerns over the location of a community garden. I sent her all the paperwork that the committee had prepared as backup, that this was a well thought out proposal, and that indeed that property is larger than what you've asked. I think it's a little more than a third of an acre, but anyway, and some of what you've defined as needing in the garden space, a children's play area, etc., the whole playground across Elm Street, which is sort of opens up more space for your garden to be garden. But as I said, that they don't have an answer back from HUD. I just asked today because I have been looking at areas that might be used where the town has land, but they're areas like out by the town garage, and that's, from what I'm understanding, if you want walkable, that far out Central Street isn't necessarily where people might want to go. And then other areas are not. My concern with 27 Main is the council has made it clear that it wants commercial establishments on that, and that sooner rather than later, and that it would seem almost self-defeating to make something and then have to tear it down.
No, I agree.
And that we'd be better served if the council decided to move forward with this, to have a location where it had a secure future, that it was in a place where it could stay, and it had water access, and it had parking access without displacing anybody else, and but it still was accessible in the ways that you discussed, which is a sidewalk thing in town. And so I did take the liberty of looking into that in case the council is looking to be supportive of this idea as a potential. And fortunately, we're in January, not June, so there's time enough to determine, number one, if the council wants to think about this, and number two, if they do, to pursue a relationship that might allow it on private property that could be, with their concern being addressed, that the liability issues would be associated with the town.
Right.
I don't know that we'll solve the land problem. I have a question about 2 pieces of land. And then also,
We can't hear you, Paul.
Yeah.
can you hear me at all? How about now? You can hear me now? Okay. How much land have we explored at all?
I didn't hear that.
You're
Yeah.
breaking up.
Carry on. I'll rectify that.
I don't know that leaving was the answer.
What was the name of that the area you were talking about with the baseball field and everything? Because I'm not too familiar with the area, and I want to just look and see what it.
It's up
Was
Elm
it-
Street. It's across from the superintendent's office. There's the Ian's Playground is there, and Gardner Commons is a former school that was. It's at the end of Elm and Summer Street
on the
intersects.
corner of Elm. Yep.
You go up by the police department, by the police station, and keep going straight, and you're gonna hit it.
Okay.
Yeah, I walk my dog there pretty often, and sometimes I stand right on that lawn and go, "This would make a good garden." So, yeah, I've actually walked around going, "This would work." So, yeah. But
Can you hear me now?
yes,
Okay. The question I had, and I know we're probably not going to solve the land problem tonight, is, but just I had questions about two pieces of land, the one on the corner of Summer and Elm Street, and then how much land that we have. It would have to be cleared, but over by the town pool. It is a fairly central location. There's a parking lot. When I was a child, I don't want to talk about when, but when I was a child, there were walking paths and stuff in that area behind the pool down. And I'm just curious as to how, Sue, if you looked at that at all, and if we have any idea how much land there is there. Mark probably knows.
Yeah, I sold the house, Paul. The house on Pond Street goes all the way up almost to the embankment of the pool.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you. Yep.
so there is no land behind the pool.
It's privately owned, Teresa.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Carter Newell owns it. Ed, did you have any other places?
No, my biggest thing is I definitely support the community garden. I think it's a great idea. For 27 Main, I don't think so much, but the Gardner Commons area, if that would work out, I'd be in full support of that. I think that's a good location.
That sounds awesome, honestly.
Well,
I do think also, because my main concern about 27 Main Street is everything that the town manager talked about, but also the likelihood that we would end up having to move the garden at a later date is probably pretty high there. So I guess I would ask everyone involved, and it will probably be something that the council will want to talk about too, is in terms of the wish list, prioritizing where we would like to place this. For example, if we placed it out by the town garage, certainly not promising anything, but there is a lot of land there, et cetera, et cetera. I know it's not as accessible, but what's the bigger priority? That probably is something that we should have a conversation about if the land over by Gardner Commons happens to not be a possibility.
So how do we want to proceed with this tonight, Paul?
Good question. I think probably, I mean, I will say this is a pretty thorough proposal in terms of a plan and the things that we need to have. I think probably, unless anyone else on the committee would like anything additional, we probably should start with what the council's overall opinion is here, and any priorities that the council may want to put forward first. I don't want to assume anything about 27 Main Street without hearing it from the entire council. And I want to make sure everybody has a chance to voice concerns. So unless there's anything else we want to bring to the council this evening, I would like to start there and then see where the council wants to go with this.
One other thing, Teresa, is it thought out who would supply the water? I mean, if we are able to get public water, is that something you're expecting the town to contribute, or would the organization through the plots be able to pay for it?
It would be great if the town could supply the water, but we have been talking about doing a rain catchment system, building a shed and putting rain gutters on the shed and having rain barrels to collect that water. We were also looking at the possibility of a freestanding water catchment system. It's like it's a great big plastic bin, but it has like an inverted umbrella so that it has a lot of surface area. So when the rain comes down, it all funnels into the rain catchment system. I haven't seen a complete system for sale. I've seen do-it-yourself at home kind of thing, and it involves PVC piping and glue. So, so I know those options are out there. So we were talking about that. But if we could get public water, that makes it tons easier, and certainly much easier than bringing water by the gallon in by your bicycle.
Yes.
Yeah. Sue, it looked like you had something else to add.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do we need a motion if we want to recommend to the council to move forward, or what are you looking for here, Sue?
Can I make a suggestion?
Please.
I think that we should schedule before our next meeting, another infrastructure committee meeting. By that time, I would hope to have information on the Gardner Commons site. If that's something that you're okay with me continuing to explore with them, so that there could be a more cogent discussion about the realities of where location might be. And maybe you could just straw poll the councils that are here as to whether they support the idea of doing this additional research and moving it forward to the next committee meeting, and that way we'll know, because most everybody's here except Peter, right?
I would be supportive.
Yeah, I would support that. Mark, I did have a quick question. Is there any land over by the Reggie Ginn unused?
There's land above the field where the old Cub Scout camp used to be, but it would take a lot of clearing, I think.
It's
make
all
that
grown
work.
in.
It's fairly grown. I mean, it's open a bit, but it would take some work. And it's, I don't think you'd be out in the open, which I think they would want.
Yeah.
Yeah. We want sun exposure.
Yeah.
Part of the problem with my current garden is that I'm in a long and narrow lot, and I've got buildings and trees, and I don't own those trees, so I can't take those trees down. So I have to, deal with this tiny section that gets maybe 6 hours of sun a day, and I move my plants around, and I plant everything in a very tight area. So having a little bit more space to spread out in full sun would be awesome.
I have a similar setup as well.
I mean, the question Ed brought up, there is space and there is sun, but it would take clearing, and you wouldn't be out in the open. I mean, it would be woods behind you. You'd get sun, but it'd be woods. So you wouldn't have the protection of everybody in the community seeing it.
Yeah, there is that. I'm also wondering how many deer would there actually be at Gardner's Common, because I know I do not have deer. Okay, I have a few deer in my backyard, but not a lot. How much of a deer fence would even be necessary? Or could we go with a smaller fence, a less expensive fence? So where this garden is will also dictate how much of a deer fence we need.
I think anywhere in town, if you have a large open garden, the deer will come, whether they're there
They
or
will
not.
come, right?
I live right next to that pool property that we mentioned, and I have deer that come out from in behind.
Okay.
In the middle of the day, so I don't know that I would count on that, but so I guess at this point, I think we'll take this to the council. I probably should have a motion in terms of that.
A motion in support of the community garden concept.
Yeah, I would second that, and we'll have another infrastructure meeting.
Yep, sounds good. I will bring that to the council at our meeting this evening, as well as we'll talk about setting up an infrastructure committee meeting for the next council meeting, or prior to the next council meeting as well. Great.
Does this committee meet every month?
it meets as needed, usually prior to council meetings. So we would meet again, and we'll set up a committee meeting for 2 weeks from tonight, prior to, and the time will be announced.
Okay.
I'm hoping it's not quite as early as this one was. It might be a little bit later, either start at 6 or 6:30,
Okay.
depending on what else we have. Yep. Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the animal shelter and staffing discussion.
Public safety and our ACO is here. Deputy Chief Winchester will be making a presentation, and then available for questions, etc.
Good evening. Can you guys all hear me?
Yep.
So a little bit of information I have for you on our animal control officer and the shelter. So during the 2021-2022 budget, we had budgeted 1,040 hours at $15 an hour for that position. That position currently has 9 communities, including Bucksport. So there's Bucksport, Moreland, Warrington, Dedham, Penobscot, Winterport, Prospect, Stockton Springs, and Searsport that our shelter houses animals for. In the past, we didn't have that number of communities. We've added some in the past, but the population has remained about the same because we once had a contract with Hamden, but we no longer have that. Last year, or this year, our animal shelter took in 43 cats and 30 dogs, a total of 73 animals from communities other than the town of Bucksport. And that requires our animal control officer to do paperwork for those communities to bill each respective community. Also, Allison has adopted out 93 animals from our shelter, which is double the last 2 years combined. That's a lot of animals to adopt. We had 221 animal complaints or calls for service this year. Our animal control officer currently does microchipping, flea and tick medication, two doses of deworming, 2 doses of distemper, and medication to animals that are needed when they're sick prior to the adoption process. The adoption fees when the animal's adopted cover those expenses, and it's much cheaper than having a local vet do that service for us. Our animal shelter does have policies and procedures that she has to follow, and some of those include all kennels, cages, and runs shall be cleaned daily, and all waste properly disposed of. All puppies, kittens up to 12 weeks old must be fed twice a day, and adults will be fed at least once a day. Dogs will be removed from a cage a minimum of twice a day, every 24 hours. So depending on the number of dogs, depends on the amount of time that she has to spend walking those. I can tell you that we currently have 4 dogs and 17 cats at our shelter, which the cats are actually down. We had 22 to 25 recently. So quarterly, we receive budget notifications from HR giving us a status on our budget lines, and recently noticed that the animal control budget line was nearly exhausted halfway through the year. So Director Gagan and I began a little investigation to determine how the funds had been depleted so rapidly. And so the animal shelter opened in the early to mid 80s. And for most of those years, our former animal control officer worked a part-time schedule there, but a full-time schedule in the dispatch. And that position allowed him to do a lot of the paperwork process, the adoption paperwork, calls, follow-up, billing, and all the paperwork while he was doing his full-time job as the dispatch. So it was kind of hidden time that he wasn't getting paid for on the animal control side. His hours averaged 12 to 16 hours per week, but those hours were strictly for hours at the shelter doing the cleaning and the walking of the animals and caring of the animals. It did not include the billing, the adoption paperwork that he could be doing in the dispatch. So also during that time, our animals go to Topsom for spay and neutering. And the reason they go to Topsom is because that clinic gives us the best deal. And when Allison goes, she takes 10 to 15 animals at a time. And that takes up a significant amount of time. It takes a whole day. So in our investigation, what we learned was the hours we had set in our budget were strictly hours for her time at the shelter and didn't take into consideration the amount of paperwork that she was required to do for billing, adoption, and so forth. So looking forward, what are we going to do as far as the position? If we were to do away with the animal shelter, the town of Bucksport is still required by law to have an animal control officer. We recently contacted the Bangor Humane Society to see what the fees would be for moving to them if our shelter was to go away. And they do a per capita, it's $1.43 per person for 5,000 Bucksport citizens, $7,150 to contract with the Bangor Humane Society. And then you still have to consider the animal control officer salary that we're required to maintain. So if you add her salary, that's $22,750. And that does not include Social Security, Medicare, workers' comp, or fuel mileage to transport animals to the Humane Society if we did contract with them. So Director Gagan spoke directly with them, and we also learned that they are not accepting new communities. They are absolutely packed full, and they've actually cut hours because of staffing. So even if it was a possibility, funding-wise, they just simply are not taking on new communities. So that got us looking to where would we go next, and that led us to the small animal shelter in Ellsworth, and they do not do per capita, they do by animal. And what we learned was they bill out $55 a day for a dog and $24 a day for a cat for strays. And surrenders are $20 a day for dogs and $14 for cats. So just to put that into perspective, we recently had 22 cats at our shelter for approximately 3 weeks. And the cost, according to that billing system, would have been about $11,000 for our animals. The town of Sedgwick currently has 2 dogs that they're housing there, and they've already racked up a bill of $5,000 to house the dogs for 2 months. So additionally, the travel to these other clinics, if we did away with our shelter, would add wear and tear to our animal control vehicle. And then there was also the possibility that our patrol staff would have to transport these animals because the animal control position is a part-time position. So if she was not available or her assistant wasn't available and we had an animal, our patrol staff would be required to do the transport to another community. So in conclusion, the animal control officer is a mandatory position that we are required to maintain with or without an animal shelter. And after reviewing the options available, it appears obvious that maintaining or improving our animal shelter, along with incorporating a full-time animal control officer, would be the most feasible option available. Therefore, it's my recommendation that we consider adopting a position of a full-time animal control officer. And also, I would make the recommendation that we change our billing per capita to those communities that we are servicing from 75 cents a day to $1 a day to offset the additional fees. And I have prepared to take questions if you have any.
Paul, I just have a little to add to that, if it's okay.
Please.
The 75 cents is the per capita to participate in our shelter. any animals brought to our shelter by other communities pay a daily rate to be there for cats and dogs. In addition to that, and any vet bills that are incurred because of animals brought from other shelters, I mean other communities, are billed directly to those communities as well. So the town recoups income from the per capita fee and from the daily rate paid for any animals brought in from those particular. The per capita generates approximately $13,000 a year at the current rate, and about thus far in this year $23,000 in additional fees for days in which animals have been in our shelter from other communities. This is just sort of to provide background of, what having other communities participate in our shelter does. That, and the fact that nearly 50% of the animals that we deal with that we're not compensated for by somebody else or our own. They're the ones that came from here. So just a little more information.
Questions from the committee?
I don't really have questions, Paul, but I had a little statement I'd like to say.
Please.
I went out to the shelter and talked with Allison about 3 weeks ago, I guess, and caught her off guard because she wasn't expecting to do a tour that day, but I got to see it in full capacity, and I'm amazed that they can do what they do with what they're being dealt. They're doing a great job. I would agree with everything Chief Winchester was saying, that we do need to go when you get a good person as staff, you keep them. You do what you do to keep them. And I'm in full support of making Allison full-time, given benefits. And on top of that, I know this is a different discussion for later on about the shelter itself, but there was no bathroom out there. There's two very small buildings. And I do think, again, this will be another discussion, but this kind of all groups together that there had been mention of adding on to those buildings, and I don't agree with that. I think we need to start with a new building for the shelter, for an office, for a bathroom with a shower, a full bathroom with a shower, and separate for the dogs and separate for the cats. And I don't think we should tear down the old buildings, because I think, Allison would know better, but I think that would be perfect for one for storage, one for quarantine. I know we had mentioned before about should we add on to the building, and I don't think we should. But tonight's discussion, I am definitely in support of. She's got to be putting in more hours than 30, 35. We know this. So I definitely would like in full support of putting her on full time. That's it.
Mark?
Yep, I would agree with that. I'd be in full support of making it permanent. Sue, are we going to talk about the structure itself later? Is that what we're doing, or are we talking about it all at once?
The shelter piece, for that, Mayor Stewart had talked about an overall visit with a committee in the beginning of March when it was actually daylight, so the people could go as a group to discuss that and then have it. I know that Deputy Chief Winchester has asked for cost estimates on construction of one that was a tentative design just to get a ballpark figure, and then there had been some discussion internally about the fact that fundraising for a new animal shelter, I think, would be a really successful process in this community. There is a great deal of support for that shelter, and I've received numerous calls from people who are concerned about the fact that it needs to be more than it is right now, or the idea that it might not be at all. So that is kind of a separate, but Mayor Stewart had talked about that being once the whole council had had a chance to take a look at what the next step would be.
To me, this also comes, oh, sorry, Paul.
No, go ahead, Ed, and then I'll open it up to anybody else on the call that has anything.
To me, we've talked about this before, and I've had a strong stance on it, that we didn't create this. This has been around for a long time, but we need to take care of the things that we have, and we need to keep improving them as they grow. And I think that's what we would be doing by promoting full-time and putting some money into a new structure that will sustain itself for the next 30 years. I don't like seeing things, and generally, with all possible, we try not to do that, but I don't like seeing things run to the wayside because we just keep pushing them off. This is one of those things that, again, we didn't create it. It's been here a long time, but we need to improve it and keep it going and update it.
Anyone else on the call have any comments on this issue? Dan?
I agree with what Ed said completely. I think that we need to move forward and make sure that we have a facility that's up to standards and, you know, that can support the surrounding communities. And I see it as an even better opportunity. And I really like what Deputy Winchester said about, you know, Allison and working those parts of it. And so I'm definitely on board with that too.
I definitely agree too.
A member of the public that is on this call also added something into the meeting chat that there, in terms of around access issues when the transfer station is closed for the ACO. So something to keep in mind as we move forward on either of these issues, especially the one around the facility itself as we move forward. Anything else before? Do we need a motion to bring this to the council review this evening?
The purpose of this discussion, we're in the middle of preparing budgets. And the purpose of this is to understand if this committee and the council will support the inclusion in this upcoming budget of a full-time position for the ACO.
Okay.
That's where we are. David, am I correct?
Yes, I got you. Yes, I'm waiting for the director to unmute me. Yes, you're correct. It's his fault. Always is.
That's fine. We can report that back to the council this evening then, in terms of the discussion that's taken place around this tonight. Great.
Paul, you got another comment from someone in the public as well.
Oh, my apologies. In the chat?
Yes, sir.
That's a great way to do this. We also have a comment from a member of the public around contacting a company around it, possibly acquiring a temporary heated trailer or shelter, was potential costs for that as well. Something we could take a look at as well. Anything else? As the town manager mentioned at the outset, that we do have a busy agenda, so we will continue. We will move forward here, but I will report back to the council on this evening. The next item on the agenda is fire EMS staffing discussion.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Evening, Chief.
Thank you for taking the time to meet with Director Gagan and myself today. I would like to start by saying much has been accomplished in the past several years, and we are very thankful and grateful for the support. Our goal is to provide essential life-saving services to respond in a timely fashion while trying to increase our minimum staffing levels to a safe level for all. The current staffing levels are no longer sufficient to meet the needs of our community, nor have they been for quite some time. As our community grows, along with an aging community with new houses and developments, our life safety protection has increased, which in turn creates more calls, while at the same time, unsafe staffing reductions occurring in the call departments. I predict in the next several years, we're going to have more reductions in the call departments due to the aging members and retiring. In Bucksport, there are 7 multi-unit apartment complexes with many residents living in each building, which in turn makes for, to say the least, very challenging situations due to the population density in each complex for fire call responses, including evacuation of the building by all the tenants. The great majority of these people are seniors or those with ability challenges. EMS calls are greatly affected by these types of properties as well. Approximately 18 to 25% of our EMS call responses each year are from just these 7 complexes alone. As your packet indicates, we're playing catch up from years past and need to look toward the future while trying to keep the cost as low as possible for our citizens. In 2018, Jeff Hammond did a life safety protection survey on the amount of apartment complexes, multi-unit apartments, and single-family homes converted to apartments. Since 2018, the following has been done or is scheduled to be done. Park Street Broadway extension, new house lots for increased housing, a new 11-unit apartment building complex in the old Timberlands building is now being developed. A new 42-lot mobile home park at Silver Lake Estates. A multi-unit apartment on Buck Street is to be developed. Panquist Cap still looking at Bucksport for a multi-unit 40-unit apartment complex. 7 out of 8 new house lots have been sold in the business park for development. Since 2018 to present, there have been 84 new homes permitted in Bucksport. We want to be clear, we strongly support any new construction, be it homes, businesses, apartments, etc., which we believe is the direction the town is heading and wants to accomplish. However, we ask that the infrastructure side of things, proper staffing and equipment, keeps up with the increased life safety protection burden placed on fire and EMS departments. Moving forward, I recommend some type of committee be formed to evaluate staffing levels each year to make sure we need to be where we need to be and be prepared for increased calls and further growth within the town. It can only improve the quality of life for all and improve response times to those in needs, thus increasing the survivability rate of the emergency. I've given you quite a bit of information. I'm not sure we'd have enough time to go over every bit of it. I can try to answer as many questions as I can, as well as Director Gagan. And I thank you for listening and your consideration.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions or comments from the committee? Anyone else on the call? Sue.
Of course, I want to talk. Again, the purpose of this discussion now is that we are in the process of developing budgets and in discussing department needs with Public Safety Director Gagan and Deputy Chief Denning. This isn't the first discussion we've had about staffing on the fire EMS side of the house, and we have taken steps, as Deputy Chief Denning said, over time to try to meet the needs that we have. We've incorporated per diem. We did add 2 back in 2018. However, it's my understanding they were only able to staff 40% of our per diem shifts because we finding people who are not working somewhere else. Generally, per diems come to you from another full-time position and they'll fill in shifts. But it's my understanding, and I think, am I correct, Deputy Chief Denning, that 40% of those go uncovered, meaning that we're hitting some of them, but it's not a consistent way to meet our staffing needs, number one, and number two, that even if we could, we're short people. There are times when there's no one in the bay, and if a call comes in, it's routed to another agency, which extends response time significantly when it comes. So the discussion night is to sort of bring the council up to speed. I think that Deputy Chief Denning did a really good job of providing a lot of information for you on where our calls were, where they came from. It was very educational in looking as to sort of what happened when all the complexes came in terms of their overall impact, and to take a temperature here for what you're prepared to see in a budget presentation. And I guess that's the question for the committee to decide. Are you willing to look at a budget that includes 3 people or 2 people, or some hybrid that is a process that gets us there? I guess maybe some reaction to the information and what the identified needs are would be helpful for both the Deputy Chief and Public Safety Director and myself, since their job is to identify the needs and my job is to find the money to pay for it. And so that's where we are.
If I could, the actual number, Sue, is 43%. So
43% that go uncovered, Chief?
correct,
Okay, thank you.
correct. And what happens, if it's uncovered, you have 2 full-timers here, and they leave on the first ambulance call. Tones are put off for another EMT or a driver to meet the ambulance in the field. That in turn allows one of the full-timers to be relieved at the scene to come back to cover for a second call, be it an ambulance call or a fire call. And what's happening, we're not getting any response from anyone, be it home, so the 2 leave on the ambulance run and there's no one here. So our second and third ambulance calls last year, just from 2 agencies, had to respond for us 19 times because we could not staff the second or the third ambulance. So that's quite concerning in critical calls. And I can tell you, we've had just in the last month and a half, 2 critical calls, and that situation has happened. So
So in other words, Chief, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but what you're saying is if we have ambulances, for example, in the example that you just cited, we have ambulances that are sitting in the fire station that can't go out because we don't have the staff to send them out. We have to go to another agency in order to get that to provide service while the ambulance sits in the station.
Correct. And now you're waiting a half hour for an ambulance. So it's critical that if you're in a life or death situation, that ambulance needs to have tires rolling within 3 minutes of the call out the door. That's the standard. And I believe in my packet I gave you, we're not meeting that standard with ambulance 2 and 3. And I believe, and I might be wrong, I'd have to look at my papers over, I believe it's over 50% of the time we're not meeting that standard. I think it was 57%. So that's very concerning. So I don't want to be an alarmist, but we've been in trouble for a long time, and it's going to get worse. And it's not just here in Bucksport, it's statewide and countrywide. Fire and EMS departments are in trouble for staffing, be it career, full-time, volunteer, or per diem. So.
Dan.
Do you by any chance have any of the numbers of like communities or surrounding communities that how many full-time firefighters they have and paramedics?
I sure do. And I can certainly provide a copy of that to everyone.
Is that good? Is that good, Dan?
Yeah, that's great. I just wanted to see those numbers too.
Yep, I'll make sure everyone gets a copy of it. It's quite interesting.
Mayor Stewart.
Good evening, everybody. Sorry I missed the first part. We'll catch up with it. Mike, just a couple questions, please. In your report, there was some information that was concerning, and I'm wondering, what do we do when we had some of the fire safety doors that weren't operating correctly? How are we following up on those, or whose job is that to follow up on those with building inspections and things like that?
It's up to our 2 fire inspectors and the code enforcement officer. We revisited the site and they had those repaired and they are working. I believe they're supposed to, and again, I don't do the inspection side. My memory serves me correct. I believe at least once, maybe twice a year, they're supposed to go through and check those. The state make sure those systems are working correctly. So.
And do we get a report or anything when they do that, or are we going on hoping a prayer that they do it?
I don't believe we get a report on that from the state. They're obligated by law, these apartment complexes, to comply through the state fire marshal's office.
Well, and we know for a fact that we had a building that was up the road that we've condemned that wasn't doing that. So I'm just curious if how much follow-up is being done with that around, or you see where I'm going with that?
Yep. We do the best we can with our 2 inspectors. They follow the shift work, and their first task is responding on emergencies. They try to get them done as best they can. They're not 100%, and they're not where I want them to be. That's for sure.
Sure, and I think that all encompasses the life safety piece. So if, you know, if this staffing helps that, then I certainly think that's a piece that we look at. The second piece, and I'm not going to ask you for the numbers right now because I don't know if you have them, but I'd like to see, are these second and third ambulance calls, what percentage of those are like transports and not emergency calls? You know, something that we are getting reimbursed for, because that's one of the things we've talked about, is that we get called a lot for a transport or something like that. I'd like to know what the percentages of those calls that come in that are those type of calls that are compared to true emergency calls.
Okay, I don't have that information, but I think I see what you're asking. So I just want to clarify, emergency transports versus just
so I know we've talked in the past, and we've heard in the past that some of the staffing reasons were because we get ambulance calls to transport from hospital to hospital.
Okay, those are transfers.
Transfers.
We do not do transfers. We do not have the staffing for that.
But we are doing those still, no?
No, we never have. Once or twice a year, we might do a transfer from the hospital to home, but the overwhelming majority is a private ambulance service doing that. We're an emergency service, period.
Thank you.
We don't have staffing.
Thank you. That's all I had, Paul. Thanks.
Anyone else? Jim?
Yeah. How many people do you have on staff now?
Full time?
Yes.
We run 2 full-timers 24/7, 365. And we augment the staff with a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week per diem position. So the total number of full-timers are how we work our shifts. There's 3 platoons of 2 people working a 56-hour work week. And I work days, Tuesday through Friday, 10-hour days.
Okay, thank you.
Sue?
The question was asked of what our communities in our area are doing. If you read the news recently, Northeast Harbor is adding, they're taking over the private ambulance there because it's not able to continue, and staffing to 4 people a shift, which is the ultimate goal of what we're talking about here. They are, Bar Harbor is staffed to that capacity. Ellsworth is not an EMS, doesn't provide ambulance. They're EMS level, but they're discussing what to do about ambulance service and are talking about what in essence almost doubles their fire, because they have that many firefighters right now. They're a little bigger than we are, but we're a backup. We're responding to Ellsworth because we're a mutual aid partner and they're not able to do theirs. And we're required under mutual aid if we have something available to go. But the 4-person a shift is in a community that's serving the number of people that this one does is comparable to a Hamden or an Ellsworth or those. That's the nature of the number of people that are served in Bucksport, Orland, and Verona. And even if we remove the 240 or 50 calls a year for Orland that we have, we're still mutual aid required, and whatever they did as an alternative would end up in a response situation. And it's challenged more by distance. Our calls are not like someone in Ellsworth or Belfast or any of these other places that are staffed to these 4-person level, because a call for us is 2 to 3 hours. It's a 40-minute trip one way and it's 40 minutes there and it's under these new regulations, let the place air out for however long before you can even get back in the rig and then come back to Bucksport. And that extended time makes that the odds that you would have another call within an hour because you were in some place that had a hospital, it's much lower than if you've got a 3-hour window where you don't have anybody available, everybody's 30 miles away or 20 miles away, is a different kind of thing. But the staffing necessary to make sure those communities who have an hour call are staffing to the same level that we're kind of asking when ours are 3-hour calls. If that makes any sense as to sort of what's driving this and what other communities are doing in this regard.
In the interest of time, unless there's any objection, we can bring this to the council this evening under the same, I guess, as the animal shelter, is something that will, for further discussion by the council during budget considerations.
At the very least, I guess that it will help you understand your budgets when you get them in terms of this and the background of why this is an important topic.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. The second to last item on this agenda is transportation and looking at a bus for the senior center. We do have, I'll say, 10 minutes before we're 1 minute prior to the start of our next meeting. So please forgive me in advance if I interrupt the conversation in the interest of time.
Well, this is the only item that doesn't have a lot of backup in no backup in the packet, but it's something that had been proposed, was the idea of acquiring a van, and you all, I sent you the emails that I received in support of this, and then I forwarded you another one that came in after that packet was done. And Bill Foster is on the call as well, but the idea is that a handicapped accessible van, small bus, would expand the offerings of the senior center and be able to bring more people to the center for meals or activities. People are, hold on, I'm getting a call. Oh, Jacob got it, never mind. They can't participate because they can't get there. And so this would increase that opportunity, but also would increase the opportunity for seniors to go on outings that they currently can't. Bill? I can see him, but I can't.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. I was just talking about the need for the bus, and I'm sure that you could articulate in a few minutes why that is an important addition to the senior center.
Yes. Thank you for inviting me to this meeting and letting me talk. I think it's a great idea, and I'm glad that so many people brought it up. I'm glad it was a stump that a lot of the people that are on the council now took up when they were running. But there's a lot of people that are seniors that are living in our communities that live in buildings and homes and stuff that would like to come to the center and participate in some of the things that we have to offer, but they don't have any way to get here. So the use of a bus would just be beneficial to maintaining their quality of life. They would get to come to the center and have meals, participate in activities. We could also use that van to help deliver meals to people that are homebound. We've had the ability to luckily live in a community that's very sharing and giving, and the Y has let us use their van. RSU 25 has let us use a bus many times. But if we had one of our own, we could arrange trips and things a little bit easier instead of having to rely on the kindness of strangers all the time. So I know that you've received some emails, and hopefully that's a strong outpouring for this, as well as me just pitching for it. But again, I can't thank you enough for even considering it. If you have any other questions, I'll do my best to answer.
Questions or comments from the committee?
One of my questions was like the van or the bus. That'd be the purchase of it, the maintenance of it, and the driver. So how much would we be looking at to put into the budget? Or do we know this yet?
I don't know how much the cost would be. That I don't know. A driver, I don't know if we'd need to hire an extra person to drive, or if it would be someone from the senior center. I don't have that information right now. This is just something that I think is in the beginning stages of a wish or a dream. But if this is something that the council truly does want to consider, that's information I don't mind working on finding out for you.
Okay. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
Bill, do you have any examples of other communities that have done this concept, and is there grant opportunities, or is it all funded by the town?
Well, the only place that I know that's close by is the Moore Center in Ellsworth, and their community center, their senior center, they have, one of the things that they do is they have a lot of vans that they use for driving people around. But I don't know of any others that are around. We're very fortunate to be a town that has a senior center. There's a lot of towns in Maine that don't even possess such a wonderful item. But in terms of sponsorship, I think if this is something that the town wants to pursue, I think, to be honest, a lot of the money would be coming from the town, but we could not rule out the possibility of looking for sponsorships from other places.
I saw Dan's hand first, then we'll go to Sue. We might be at time by then, but we'll see.
Let's Sue go first.
Okay.
Well, there are opportunities from vehicle manufacturers to receive these things in some cases for greatly reduced prices or promotional, depending on how. The who would own would be the town. The who would maintain would be the town. The senior center has no staff or ability to do that, and a driver for this, that's the question, whether Bill drove or volunteers were licensed to be able to those kind of things would be something that would have to be worked out. But that's the who would own and who would fix. That would be the town. And if the council was supportive of the idea, we would go looking for to see what funding or opportunities are out there to offset the initial investment, and then come back to the council and talk about what the rest of it would look like.
So I know this is preliminary and you're putting it out there right now. Have you had thoughts about whether or not this van would need some sort of lift in it, or anything like that in order to get people up into the van?
It would require handicapped accessibility, meaning wheelchair access. That the population that we're serving and the town's commitment to, through its AARP, Age and Ability Action Plan, to provide accessibility whenever possible. I don't think we could. I don't think it would be in our best interest to not be consistent with that and providing this bus.
And also, And also, how many passengers are we looking at for these vans? Is it like a 15 passenger van? Or... Yep. Okay.
Yes.
Anything else anybody has that might take 30 to 60 seconds? While hearing nothing, I think this is another item, please correct me if I'm mistaken, that we can bring to the council this evening in terms of something to put on the proverbial radar for consideration as we begin looking at the budget.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Very good. We shall adjourn. See everyone in a few minutes.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.